It's time for another episode of Tucson Means Business, featuring Tucson's top entrepreneurs and leaders in the business world. And now your host, Mark Bishop.
Yes, and welcome to another show, Tucson Means Business, where we do feature the bright and the best of the business here in our city and all sorts of businesses, small, medium, and large. Their CEOs, their managers, their owners, independent people who, in normal times, are getting on with life and, doing business. And we're proud to feature this show with the compliments of the 49ers Golf and Country Club, who, like everybody else at the moment, are suffering. Yes, we are recording this particular podcast only 3 weeks in of the COVID-19 and the coronavirus, and it is very different. Lots of restaurants have closed up, but are serving with to-go, and including that, of course, is the Rincon Grill at the 49ers Golf and Country Club. Although it is closed, the restaurant per se, it is still to-go food. And, of course, the golf course is still open, so, numbers right down, and you can at least still get that game in. We're broadcasting live from Tucson Business Radio X. Our studio is in the corporate offices of Stewart Title and Trust here on Broadway in Tucson. I'm Mark Bishop, and welcome. My guests today are John Waechter and Kim Adair. Interesting people. John, for instance, principal of his own company of Waechter Advisory. And, well, it's called the Waechter Advisory Network, actually, because he's in many things. He's been many years. I think it's, 30 years, John, in Tucson?
30 plus. Yes.
No fly in this boy. In fact, you're a legal local, mate. You're 30 years.
That's what they tell me.
Whereas Kim, you're a blow-in,
A blow-in?
Kim Adair, a lovely lady, famous for her actual butt check organization. What? Butt check. Stories on colon cancer. Might be a funny name, but I tell you what, it's not a funny business. But she saved many lives and will be saving many more with the work that has come out of Butt Check. And Kim is along today to tell us all about what's been going on there and also what's coming up in the future. So welcome to the both of you guys. Welcome to Tucson Means Business in this very precarious time, isn't it?
Thank you.
A little bit crazy.
It is a little bit crazy. John, you're looking well.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad you're busy. Now, you're originally actually a Chicagoan, aren't you?
Well, just across the Indiana state line from Chicago in northwest Indiana. So, yeah, Chicago is the major hub for sure, 25 miles.
So you were a young Hoosier.
Young Hoosier, very
And
much tied to Chicago, though. That part of the state is really kind of, at least in my growing up days, more divorced from Indiana and more part of Chicago. We're in the Chicago time zone. We, all of our television and all of our media came out of Chicago, as well as the newspapers and stuff like that. So, yeah.
You talk about a small rural town. What town was that?
It's a little town called St. John. It's not a small rural town anymore. It's very much part of a megapolis of Chicago, and it's a suburb. But when I was there, it was 1,500 people, one stoplight.
So it's like everywhere else. When the cities expand, they go out towards the Little St. John.
Exactly. You got it.
You left Indiana at what, 22?
Yep.
After graduating from Indiana University, and you relocated to the City of Angels.
Yes, I did.
And started your business career working in finance for a subsidiary of Black & Decker at that time. Why to L.A., John, from Little St. John?
In 1967, when I was in 7th grade, there was a huge snowstorm in Chicago. And we were out of school for
a long time, by the sounds of it.
2 weeks, just like the kids today, and for a different reason. But ours was snow. And the snow was so heavy that I shoveled snow every morning I woke up. I had to shovel the driveway. And it took me most of the day. We in Indiana have basketball courts almost on every driveway. And after like day 3 or 4, I was throwing snow higher than the rim. And
well, to build your muscles up.
And so, yeah, it did. It was healthy.
But I would hate to have to do that all the time.
Good cardio workout.
Yeah.
I decided at that point in time that as soon as I am able, I am leaving Indiana / Chicago for good. And I would have left when I was 18, but out-of-state tuition is so stupidly ridiculous that I stayed in Indiana for 4 years, 4 years more after graduating from high school. But when I graduated from college, boom, I headed west.
You know, I hear many, many stories. I've been fortunate enough growing up in Australia where really you only got the snow if you went up looking to ski at a resort or up on the mountains where you got the thing. None of this having to come out and shovel the stuff, you know what I mean? But I can imagine it's not easy. You're freezing cold. You're rugged up like anything to keep warm. And the snow, I mean, it's not always fluffy, is it?
No, it's not always nice and fluffy. It can be heavy and wet, and it just registered with me at a young age that I just, you know, to this day, Chicago's my favorite city in the world. I've traveled the world, and I've had a lot of great experiences all throughout the world. But you know what? I can walk down Michigan Avenue and just feel at home.
You know,
in the summertime.
In the summertime. You continued your education at night while working, culminating with an MBA from USC. Then the relocation of the company headquarters from Marina Del Rey to Tucson. All right, this is where you went to LA, ended up in Marina Del Rey. I have been there, beautiful place. You were responsible for John's moving to the desert after 10 years. The company said, okay, Southern California, what about the move? Now, what was so encouraging about that?
Well, the move was an interesting move. It was culture shock for sure. Marina Del Rey to Tucson in 1988 was just a major, you know, in one sense, breath of fresh air because it was so different. The desert I'd never been really exposed to except as a visitor.
Right.
But I had family here, coincidentally enough. You know, and when I realized, you know, all the benefits that could be there, you know, I'd still be with my company. And by that time I was a vice president with that company. And my mother and father had relocated here like 10 years previously. So, I mean, it was kind of like the stars were starting to align a little bit. LA, crazy. Traffic.
Take the ocean out of Marina Del Rey and a few yachts and stuff.
Exactly, a few yachts and stuff.
And yet there's more boats in the desert than anywhere else. Did you know that? That's a fact.
And so anyway, that's kind of like how it went. So I just rolled with it. It was, you know, most didn't. You know, we didn't transfer a lot of people.
No.
And but if we did that now, most would transfer.
Right.
I mean, LA has just become that much more
unbearable. Is the word? Yeah.
Hyperextended, I guess.
I believe it's very expensive to live there now.
Oh, it's yeah.
And for me, I don't know how to handle the traffic, to be honest. Kim Adair, she's the lady behind Butt Check. What? Ever heard of it? Butt Check. That's the very successful organization that helps to prevent colon cancer. Welcome, Kim.
Welcome to you having me. Thank you.
Hey, wonderful. You entered the planet to Spokane, Washington.
Spokane. I was born there.
Spokane, Washington. Then you moved to and lived in Boise, Idaho for 22 years.
I reluctantly had to go with parents, but once I got adjusted, I really love Boise.
I've heard that. Tell me about Boise.
Boise, well, it's the capital of Idaho. It's just its own enclosed, beautiful little city, and it's lovely. I was there when I was moved there when I was a junior in high school, and it just was a picturesque town. A lot of activities. Even back when I moved there in '74, there were lots of restaurants and Philharmonic, and you know, it was a lot of politicians lived, you know, in the capital. So lots of things to do, and lovely old little homes, and it grew, you know, from Meridian. Nampa.
It's a very green place, isn't it?
It's green within the city. You know, then you travel. Back then, you would travel from Boise to Meridian. It was a lot of farmland.
Okay.
Farmland. Yeah.
Okay. Sheridan, Wyoming. And Scotland. right?
Well, that's basically my great-grandfather's. My great-grandfather, Palmer, lived in Sheridan, Wyoming, and owned the only grocery store there. And he was the worldwide rifle shooting champion for 2 years in a row.
Really?
I wish I had known him, but he was gone before I came along. And so he owned a grocery store. And then Scotland I feel is in my blood. My maiden name is Morrison. And my great-grandfather, I also didn't get a chance to meet. William Morrison also owned a grocery store.
It runs through the family.
It was crazy because my first job was with Safeway. I got hired in 1974.
Which has been some 15 years, right?
It's been more than 15 years.
Wow.
I graduated from high school in 76, but I got this job and they actually they wouldn't hire girls to be courtesy clerks, to do the bags and take them to the
really?
cars. They weren't. I was one, if not the first, Safeway bagger as a female.
Really? So was that for protection? Do you think
they just didn't think girls should be doing that kind of work? And it was family. Back then the grocery stores were family owned. I lived in Boise, where Joe Albertson resided with his lovely wife, Catherine. My parents knew them very well.
And this is Albertson's
store, which is now merged with Safeway.
Yeah,
and now
it has.
No more family owned. It's all company.
It's all
big merged. But I loved it, and I never thought I'd leave that industry. I worked a total of almost 15 years.
It's a unique industry.
It has it has become big and not so personal, but I still love it. I recently worked for Safeway about 5 years ago. I slipped in and slipped out to work a little bit there to get an idea of what they were doing these days and about what they were selling food-wise.
Right. Well, just about everything you can get if it's there. Last time I looked last night, a lot of shelves were empty. I can tell you that.
You still can't find toilet paper.
Kim, you're a little bit cowgirl with a yearning for the Scottish moors by the sounds of things.
Well, I felt, like my great-grandfather, I wished I had met both of them again. So, I always felt like I had a little cowgirl in me. And when I moved to Idaho, my neighbors owned horses, and I'd see them running off to ride bareback.
All right.
And one day I just said, can I go and watch? And the next thing I know, I'm riding one of the horses that was a little bit older, but had been the queen's horse of an organization called A Pack of Bareback Riders.
Okay.
And I rode 2 years, and I proudly rode with my 40 young Indians in the Salinas, California rodeo, which is one of the largest rodeos in the United States.
Sounds like a lot of fun. What about you, John? Ever ridden a horse?
A couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not.
Ever fall off a horse?
Never fell off a horse.
I used to love riding. Love riding.
Not a big horseman.
Mm-hmm. If it comes along, it comes along. So listen, Kim, you were a 22-year-old looking for adventure and a new career. This is when you decided to move to Armonk, New York.
I did. I decided
that was a nanny too, of all things, right?
Yeah, it was weird because I had at about 21 decided I was getting a little restless and thought I would leave for a while and could do something else, and so I wanted to be a flight attendant. So I was actually looking back into that in the newspaper for flight attendant work.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Uh-huh.
What was the appeal? The young lady, 22, good-looking blonde. I mean, what was it? The travel? Wanted to marry a captain?
Well, I did that later, so I did that anyway. But later
in those days, what was the pull?
I wanted to travel, and I really had a fear of takeoff, and I wanted to get over that. I know that sounds weird.
No, fair enough. You took it on.
I took it on.
Was the money good then?
No. When I was going to do it back then, I don't know. I don't even remember what it was back then. But it would be many years later, at age 37, that I'm jumping way ahead, but that I actually did that. And I know I worked for $8.50 an hour for 3 years until I married that chief pilot. Then I stopped working.
Well, that goes on a long way because you met a commercial photographer who you would work for as his agent in New York City. And this is how you got the bug for marketing and advertising, right, later on.
Yeah.
Beating the streets of Madison Avenue.
Yeah. So backtracking, when I chose the nanny job, which I had found in the newspaper, there was this lovely family that lived in Armonk, a doctor, a baby doctor, gynecologist, and his wife was a college librarian professor at Westchester Community College. I actually went and did classes there while I was a nanny. And 3 children who I fell in love with, and I stayed 3 years. I was going to stay for a year and maybe dig back into the idea of doing a flight attendant job. But it was so picturesque and beautiful in Armonk, Westchester community, or the community of Westchester, that I didn't want to leave, and they didn't want me to leave. So they worked really hard to try to marry me off to a nice doctor, lawyer, and I was young. I was pretty cute back then. So I didn't want to leave. But after 3 years, I realized I needed to do something with my life.
Right.
And I thought of school.
Well, there was 2 numbers we're going to talk about, sure. 37 and 47. 37 and 47. We're going to come back to that in a second because they're the most prolific things that really, really took you down a different path altogether whatsoever. John, you regard yourself as a seasoned business executive, correct?
Correct.
Along with being an entrepreneur and an organizational consultant. You've got over 40 years of experience with consumer and industrial manufacturing, along with healthcare and small business and Fortune 500 companies and more. And your current focus is on corporate expense mitigation, courses in sales, customer service, customer retention, interpersonal relationships, and behavioral assessments. Is there anything you don't do, amigo, when it comes to that?
Not really. I really, I have spent so much time in the corporate world, the entrepreneurial world, and in the startup world that you just get a total flavor for everyone's specific issues and specific concerns, and they're all unique. Mm-hmm. They're all unique. Even though there's all kinds of remnants that have a common thread, but every situation is so unique that when you drill down into it, it's just one of those strange things that you just get exposed to all this information, all this knowledge, and all this great information that people just give to you because everyone needs help, including myself, all the time. And so we just let it roll that way. So, yeah, I mean, you just get involved in so much stuff because everyone's problems are just a little bit different.
Well, business is that, isn't it?
It is.
And experiences. I mean, if I was to say to you that, you have extensive experience in the basic business disciplines of marketing, sales, operations, finance, accounting, and human resources, that just about covers business today.
It does.
What's the most exciting thing you've enjoyed about being in business and an entrepreneur versus working for a corporation?
The common thread there is what I enjoy the most, and that is team building, developing talent. I'm a predictive index practitioner, certified practitioner, trained analyst, as well as a certified talent optimizer. And when you can actually see in front of yourself the positive effects of your team building consulting and allowing organizations to actually, literally flower in front of you as a result of your your input, that's by far the most rewarding.
So if I was to say to you then, or ask you, in fact, today's world of business 2020, all right, you've been around a while, mature, a lot to offer, and yet we're up against kids with degrees and a lot younger. I don't think that's right. Do you in the workforce? Don't you think companies need more experience today than ever?
They do. Companies are really, really challenged. And so is society, in the sense that the experienced people believe that their value from a monetary standpoint is at a higher level than somebody coming out of college or somebody coming out of a 3 or a 4 year apprenticeship type of thing out of college. And companies got to really drill down. I mean, they got to search their soul. And a lot of times they find the wrong deal. They find the less expensive person being the short-term answer. And to the short answer to your question is yes. There's so much experience on the table, and it's not going to be as expensive as a lot of companies believe. But if you can actually get a person that's in their 40s or 50s, and you embrace and embolden the notion of retraining, not necessarily from a one industry to another as much as it is just from one notion to another, one attitude, one performance-enhancing culture to another.
Okay.
Then it can really be a completely valuable experience for a company.
So it's like a bit of a recharge, a bit of an update. So apart from holding a BS in business administration yourself and an MBA in long-range planning, you're a certified predictive index practitioner and a certified talent optimizer. What on earth is all that about? Tell me. Kim, I think you'd want to know too, wouldn't you?
I'm curious.
Basically, it's the utilization of data to perform, to create workforce analytics. And so, in short, because I know we're pressed for time, and this is not a short conversation, but you asked, so I'll try and make it as brief as possible. When you are trying to figure out who a person is for hiring purposes or promoting purposes, or even trying to look for an executive, like a president of your company, like I'm currently doing in another realm, you can be really steered in the wrong direction through subjective data and qualitative data, like interviews and resumes, 75% of which have inaccuracies in them, regardless whether they're intentional or not. So what predictive index behavioral assessments do is they give us some insight into the genetic makeup of the brain and what of the four major drives, where a person sits on the four major drives of the human being, whether it and the four major drives are dominance, extroversion, patience, and structure. So what we do as a certified talent optimizer is we identify where the brain is, because the brain is well over half the person. The 40 years of experience is all enculturation. It's all the stuff that you've been exposed to. So the other half that nobody talks about or nobody understands is, how did you come out of the womb? Who wired your brain, and how is it wired? Because that brain will only process so much regardless of the years of enculturation.
Right.
So what we do is we round out that personality in terms of talent optimization, and we can kind of predict, that's the predictive index part of the word, we can kind of predict where you're going to have better chances at successful outcomes than not.
So that can really save a lot of people trying to be, a square peg in a round hole.
Exactly.
And save the potential employer a lot of heartache and money too.
That's a really crucial message, Mark, because, the prospective employee or the prospective promoted employee and the employer or the boss, neither of them wants that mistake, because that mistake will get nobody anywhere. So it's really to know early if you are the round peg in the round hole,
right, or
if you're not. It helps both. And experience has proven that down the road, everybody's happier a year down the road when those paths, for some reason, diverge, but they diverge for a lot of good reasons, both cultural and genetic.
Well, that's, I guess, Kim, it's like a perfect fit for the job, isn't it, really? I mean, look how busy you were at 37, not only a flight attendant. That landed you in Colorado, where you worked for many years for a magazine, newspaper, and your own marketing advertising business. And you did all the three at once.
I did.
That takes a certain sort of, predictive and optimizing, doesn't it? And you created a popular small business campaigns for clients with an empathy on photography to grab the attention of their customers. Explain that a little bit to us.
Well, after my nanny stint, actually, there was a neighbor behind us where I was a nanny, and he was a very, very well-known, one of the top commercial photographers in New York City. And one day I asked him to take pictures of the children with me as a gift to the parents, not knowing what kind of photographer he really was. So one day he said, come with me to the city. I'm going to show you. I actually think you'd be a good fit for me to work for me as a photographer's agent. And I thought that sounded unbelievably cool. So I went with him, and we went up to his studio, and it was the photography district near Wall Street, actually, in New York City. And he opened up the big gate.
So there's a photography district as well. You've got the diamond district, you've got the money district, and now you've got a photography district.
It's New York, man.
Yeah, it's New York, man. But there were, a slew of photographers in that general area.
Okay, all right.
And when he opened up the door, I was overwhelmed. It was not the phrase I was going to use, but there were photos of Muhammad Ali, Meryl Streep, Carol Burnett on the covers of Lady Home Journal. Basically, this is a commercial photographer like any in a major city where they get their work from the ad agencies, the worldwide ad agencies. So, and again, for the sake of time, I said, I'm in. Sure. I want to do this. So I left my job, not my family. They had become my family. Got an apartment. I actually was dating an opera singer student from Manhattan School of Music, right near Columbia University, right on the border of Harlem, which I thought was cool too. So he went off to study in Rome, and I took over his little apartment for cheap, and I worked pretty much for free. I was kind of a starving kid who was working for this famous photographer, but I was very happy. And so he set me up literally by calling some of these major art directors, friends of his for years, and said, I'm sending Kim over. She just got done with her nanny job. I want you to help her feel comfortable walking into a major advertising agency. Unbeknownst to me, he just set me up. And it was great. It was perfect that he did that. And I'll just give you a quick example. This mentor that became my mentor was the head of the campaign, Be All You Can Be in the Army. And I can't remember the ad agency at the moment, but
big campaign though.
Be all you can be. I remember that, and I'm in another country.
I fell in love with this gentleman. He was old enough to be my grandfather, I think.
Right.
But again, I'm so glad they set me up that way because I was not intimidated. He let me hang Sheldon Secunda's work on the wall, which is something that they do for their major photographers, and kind of showed me the ropes. And
Very
then
good.
I beat the streets of New York. I went to all the major advertising agencies where he already had accounts. But as a very green young woman, grocery store girl, nanny,
yeah, right,
being thrown in New York like that.
Air hostess.
Yeah. Really, it was perfect because he was able to mold me a little bit. And I did. I got the bug for advertising, marketing. I'm privileged to go in and watch them put together a commercial, just like you see in the TV shows where you got the boardroom full of advertising.
Cool. Yeah.
So I got the bug, and that's what I left New York with.
Well, look at the wonderful experience and the training. I mean, to come out of Madison Avenue. I mean, I should have said actually flight attendant too. Not an air hostess, but flight attendant. I mean, look at all the magazines in Colorado, newspapers, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's the 37 era. We're going to touch on the 47 number. And this is when you got colon cancer, the diagnosis.
Yeah. So I had left New York. I went back to be with family, actually went back to the grocery store business, and then actually started while I was there my own company, janitorial service. So I won't get into all that, but after 10 years of being back in Boise, Idaho, I became single and decided to look in the newspaper for a job, and there was that flight attendant ad. And so there's where I became a flight attendant at age 37.
Mm-hmm. And that was that particular number.
That's that number. Flew for a few years, married the captain. Like women, it wasn't like that wasn't my goal, but that's what happened.
That's what happens.
I landed in Colorado. I said, "You go off to work. I don't want to do that anymore." We bought a little home up in Evergreen, Colorado, a beautiful town, about an hour from Golden, Colorado, where I fell in love with the people of Golden. I immediately set out to volunteer at the visitor center, the chamber, and went door to door and met a bunch of the business owners that were women. Secured my friendships. Got my feet wet a little bit, walked into the newspaper, told them what I'd been doing in New York, and they gave me a desk. Said, we'd love to have you on our team as a freelancer. So I didn't have anybody at my heels. I just went to all the meetings. I bought a little business called Golden Greetings, which was the local welcome service. Revamped it, used my creative background to, make it cool. And so I had this marketing little business where I visited new homeowners and working at the newspaper. I get a knock at my office that I personally had an office right on Main Street looking at Coors. And in walks this very elegant woman who said, "I heard about you. I would like you to work for me." And she slapped down her beautiful little boutique magazine that had an outreach of about 250,000 people. It went to all the businesses. It went to in the mail. And I looked through it, and it was full of photography. It not a lot, but it was very colorful. And I handed it back to her, and I said, "Okay, I'll work for you." So I had briefly, I'll throw it all together. I had the newspaper, the magazine, my own little advertising business. One of my girlfriends was a little photographer in town. She started her own photography business. I asked her if she would be hired to the magazine. And we set out to create small business campaigns with an emphasis on that beautiful picture of what Mo, Mary Lukens, and I did together. So we created really popular sections in the newspaper, profiles of leaders. They let us do whatever we wanted as long as I sold a bunch of ads. So I sold a big chunk of the advertising in that magazine. They allowed me to have a column, so I talked about my own clients. So, I fell into something, again, where it was just, I was allowed to be creative.
So how did this lead to the colon cancer diagnosis?
Thank you. So
all right, butt check.
I am working happier than I've ever been, collecting animals when I'm
doing
home.
Your thing, okay.
Doing my thing. My life was amazing, and I have colon cancer in my family. My dad had it. My grandmother died of it.
So it's been right through.
Right.
Then.
It was in my family.
Yep.
And my doctor a year earlier had given me I call it the slip, had given me the referral to go get a colonoscopy because he was on it. He was making sure, because of my family history, that I had the colonoscopy earlier than the age of 50. So I put it in my purse and I left it there for about a year. Mm-hmm. And I went back. I had a little skin rash, and then being vain, I went back for that. And he's looking at my chart, and he said, I don't see where you got your colonoscopy. Mm-hmm. Did you do that? And I said, no. And he just flew out of his chair.
A lot of people won't. A lot of people don't. A lot of people are scared. A lot of people just, not up to it. But how did you get involved with the campaign to get your butt checked? How did you create that? Where did it start? Because
he was on my ass, and I went in and had that colonoscopy, and I had a bad polyp. I had colon cancer, mm-hmm. and I was shocked. And no one I knew around me had an experience with colon cancer. And I went to my photographer girlfriend, and I was scared.
You've done everything else, Kim, right. I tell you. So now all of a sudden you're given this.
And I was scared, and because I was waiting for the results. And I said, "What if I have it?" And she said, "Then you're going to deal with it. I want to help you with that." So I did. I ended up. I had already said I had it. So I had surgery. I had a wonderful doctor, originally a prince in Nigeria, who's now a colorectal surgeon, one of the best in Colorado. Did my surgery, walked into my room and said, wow, Kim, it didn't go anywhere. You're home free. And I get chills thinking about it. And I got out of that hospital I was in my jammies and I kissed the ground, and I promised myself that I would not let anyone I knew, any family, any colleagues, friends, slip by with that, what I had not. So
this was the drive. This was the start of the idea, and you created then.
I created Butt Check, and it all happened because I was in those jammies and I was walking around Golden, Colorado, picking up stuff from my office in my pajamas, ran across Peter Coors at the little drugstore and said to him and the mayor and everybody else, oh my gosh, they all knew I was going in. I said, I want you to go get your butt checked. I just threw it out there.
Yeah.
Later, over a cocktail with a girlfriend, she said, you have to name it this. And she's got me the URL, and she said, you're going to name it this.
And that was the birth of it. Now, this also caught the attention of Katie Couric, the Broncos, which is another story. But that was marvelous, and it has led to a national campaign in lots of different ways, and it has saved a lot of lives.
A lot of lives
right?
over the course
Very
of
simple,
12
really. And the logo is like a pair of cheeks with a tick. Get your butt checked.
Yep.
How honest can you have that? Tell me, young John.
That is graphically extremely simple and conveys a really solid message. It's great.
You're listening to Tucson Means Business, proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club, that has the pool and swimming and gymnasium and family rooms and all sorts of things for weddings and bar mitzvahs and parties and God knows what. Although the restaurant is closed at the moment, you could still order food and pick it up. Go get it, all that type of thing. To go, as we say. John, all the knowledge training that you've done here in Tucson, what does Waechter Advisory Network, it's the umbrella as I understand it, what are you currently dealing in?
Well, because it's an umbrella, we deal with a lot of stuff. Several things that I've already talked about with regards to the talent optimization and all that, the HR stuff and organizational development. But also, I am a media consultant for Green Living Magazine, which is really about educating and inspiring our readership for a life of sustainability.
Right.
And it's
how's that going these days?
It's an escalating concept. I mean, it's just going
green, sure. But everybody's not tuned in yet, are they?
No. We got a long ways to go, and the coronavirus is really not helping.
It's not helping right now either.
Because so much of the sustainability message is done through events and just togetherness, and we're being denied that appropriately so. Right now, so it's a little bit of a hiatus, but we'll get through it. And then, but that sustainability thing, not going away. We are not going away at all. And Green Living Magazine is a little bit different than most publications because we don't really focus on any particular situation like personal health and wellness or anything like that. We deal with it all: building materials and cars and electric cars and all the new gadgets that are coming out that are sustainability and composting. And we've got great companies here in Tucson like Tank's Green Stuff doing magical stuff, and even Tucson Water and the Pima County Department of Environmental Quality. PDEC. They're just doing great stuff, and we're getting that stuff. Suntran buying a new electric bus here soon. So
there are leaders in the field that are out there doing it.
They are, right. And we're trying to promote that.
So talent optimization, executive placement, sales training, media services, you offer the whole gamut.
I do,
and you're very easily to contact. LinkedIn is your biggest access, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm just, LinkedIn is becoming so important in the business community, and everything I deal with is business. There's no question about it that we do classes on social media, on Facebook and all the Instagram and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to what I really do myself and where my clients are, LinkedIn is the more appropriate place for me.
Now, you also teach a lot of business, but non-profit consulting as well.
I do.
And although nonprofits are a darn business, big time,
they are,
and getting so possibly more and more, right?
Yes, absolutely.
What's the biggest thing you find between the two?
The volunteerism aspect of nonprofit leads to more problems than are realized, and because the regulatory world that we live in is so, it can be rigid and can be flexible, but when it comes to the nonprofit world, they're so reliable. They need so much volunteerism that there's little expertise in so many of the functions that they need, and they have people doing things in certain slots because they can, and they have the time and they have the hours. So what that leads to is an outgrowth of noncompliance. It's unintentional.
Right.
It's completely surprising to most executive directors. But the situation usually is program policies, board policies, administrative policies, and other types of categories depending on the nonprofit. There's nobody looking at how they coalesce and how they must align.
Right.
So that so the nonprofit consulting in Waechter Advisory Network is all about making sure that we prevent red flags. You can't have certain administrative policies that are developed by a volunteer be in not in violation, but not in alignment with the board policy. And it happens a lot.
Well, you've got 3,500 alone in Tucson, organizations desperately needing help, and you're lucky to probably get what you can get.
Yes.
In the way of volunteers.
But most nonprofits don't realize it until it's too late.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is to make sure that 501(c) is
spot on
for
what it is.
And if you've got policies that are contradicting one another and you don't even know it, then that's kind of...
You're looking for trouble.
Yep.
Interesting. When we come back, we're going to find out what this Women Under the Sun is all about. And Kim Adair is behind this and never rests, does she? No, more. It's Women Under the Sun, Arizona, and she's going to give us the skinny on the organization, what it's going to do, what it's already doing. Yeah, from what I understand, it's a predominantly women-based group of small business owners and leaders supporting each other's businesses, aspirations, and shared ideas. And there's a lot to that as well. We'll be right back in 1 second. Lisa DeFalco is the Director of Fitness and Events at the beautiful 49ers Golf and Country Club. And don't forget, it's open to the public. And you may not want to play golf. You may not even want to go to the restaurant for a bite to eat, whether it be breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Maybe you're a fitness person. Boy, is there a lot at the club. Lisa, you have so much that the club can offer somebody.
Well, yes, we do. And we have a lot of things going on in the fitness center for all ages. We offer different kinds of classes, from Les Mills Body Pump to yoga. We even have boxing now.
Wow.
I know. We've got some boxing. We also have ballroom dancing for adults. We have lots of different kinds of dance
Ballroom
classes
dancing too. This goes on during the day, right?
Yes,
in the
during the
beautiful big new fitness center there at the club.
Yes, it is a beautiful fitness center.
Wow.
And we have lots of other activities for families who aren't really a member. You don't have to be a member to be a part of some of these programs. We work a lot with the school district, Tinkerverde Youth Programs, buses the kids from school to the club to do golf lessons, fitness classes, swimming, The junior high kids get to come on over and do some body pump. It's really amazing.
Isn't that a great thing? So they bus the kids there, and they must have a ball. I can imagine the smiles on their faces.
They're so adorable. We just love the kids. They have so much fun. It's a blast.
So there's plenty to do, and with summer coming up, of course, there's aerobics, isn't there, in the pool?
Yes, we have water aerobics in the pool, and we get a lot of people in for that. That's a really popular class. It'll change a little bit over the summer because we have a huge swim team. A lot of fun stuff with the swim team going on. And we also have junior recreation camps over the summer. A lot of things to do for the kids, and it's mostly all day. We work with Tucson Twist-Its. They come out and do some clinics. 72 Aquatics comes out, brings out their scuba equipment, and the kids get to go scuba diving in the pool, which is
cool.
Pretty cool.
Anybody listening can phone you on what or contact you directly? How do they do that?
They go ahead and call. They can call the club at 749-4925, extension 211, or you can send us an email. Check it out on the website at 49erscc.com.
Lisa DeFalco. She is the Director of Fitness and Events at the famous 49ers Golf and Country Club. Welcome back to Tucson Means Business. Kim, why did you create your social networking group, Women Under the Sun?
I am waiting on my nonprofit status. I have really good lawyers, some of the best lawyers in all of Arizona. And I had a little period of time where I was sitting on it, excuse the pun, and it had taken I had some bumps along the way. When I moved here, I didn't know anyone, so I had taken it out of my nonprofit status out of the hands of also a large law firm in Denver. And when I moved here, I just left it alone for a little while, looking for the right people to take it on. Here it's 12 years later now, but with all of that time gone by, I had the time to create the right narrative. So your narrative is the generic narrative that goes out with your nonprofit status that explains what you're going to do with your organization.
With Women Under the Sun, is that focused on cancer?
Yeah, and that's confusing, but I have paperwork that makes it simple. That the narrative of my cancer work, and I kind of took you off track a little bit, was the beginning of Women Under the Sun. So while I was waiting, waiting for the nonprofit status, which is happening, I had this time on my hands, and I created my own network. I went out in the community and just went door to door like I had done in Colorado, introduced myself to women, business owners, leaders that I had known were out there. I started with Lisa Krikowa.
So how does Butt Check tie into your social networking with Women Under the Sun?
Well, and that was confusing for people at first. Basically, I just wanted a network of people so that I could talk about what was important to me, find out what was important to them. Everyone has things that they care about. It's not necessarily health related. Feeding children in our community, as they're doing right now. I wanted a platform to bring the small business owners together so I'd have an audience to talk about Butt Check.
All right. So what is the purpose with the other chapters in other states of Women Under the Sun?
Well, because once I got this going, it's been 3 years, and it successfully have a good broad small businesses of eclectic group of people. I thought about my Colorado and how it would be lovely to start the same thing there. Just take what I created here, duplicate it. It's just a very simple social networking group. Anyone can start a social networking group.
Well, I was going to say there are quite a few. Why do you think this will be successful, with so many others out there?
Well, I'll give you an example of why I think it's already been successful. I got contacted by an Oprah producer a couple 6 weeks ago.
Cool.
And they chose me, and they chose the Brunch Babes. I still quite don't know the story, but we had a chance to help host Oprah here, or help bring people to her book taping group.
That was the book club,
right? I didn't really, I knew I had started to know people in the community. I didn't really have a chance to meet business owners before because I focused on hanging out with cancer researchers when I moved here.
Right. And you're coming cold into a city, don't know a soul, you know.
I once again became single. I came here to be with family, but I also had done my homework on the head cancer researchers that were involved with colorectal cancer. So I immediately made an appointment with the top guy at our cancer center, Dr. Gene Gerner. Went to breakfast with him and his wife, and I looked at him. I said, I want to work with you. And he looked at me and said, I want to work with you. I mean, it's just naturally just a fit. The next thing I know, I'm taking him to L.A. to meet Katie Couric and introducing his work personally to Katie. And I won't get it. That's too long of a story.
Got my word for now. It is. Yeah, tell me.
It's too long of a story other than I did get Katie Couric's attention when I had colon cancer at surgery, and she had come to Denver. And I was working for the magazine and wanted to get in front of her.
So let me ask you a question, right? Why did it take you a year, to get your own colon cancer screening when you have the family history that you did?
It's not unheard of, but it's really you ignore things like that, you know. And back then I'm 62 now, but I was 47. I still felt young. I was busy. I was being successful in my work.
You just let life get in the way, basically.
I just really didn't take it seriously, and didn't think it could happen to me. Although here's the deal. Okay, so we're back to colon cancer. I have a list of symptoms here. Sometimes there's no symptom at all to go by, but third down on my list.
Now, that was my next question, basically.
Okay.
Give us a couple of symptoms.
Sure. Constipation, diarrhea, blood in your stool, fatigue, weight loss. I had, and I'm not shy to say, I had blood in my stool on and off for an entire year.
That's a usual one, right? That's
right.
That's one that, doctors always ask you about and people notice and so on.
So I would go in for my regular checkup a year prior, and I have this symptom. And that's when he said, you need to get a colonoscopy. And I said, sure, okay.
Right.
And I didn't go do it.
Now, what stopped you, do you think, at the time?
Being a flight attendant, I just blew it off as hemorrhoids.
So let me talk about this today. This stuff now, you see it on the TV ads, the box is sent to your home
Right.
and all that jazz. How correct is that?
What's popular right now in the home test is the Cologuard. We just hosted the Cologuard tournament here. I actually proudly walked.
That's what I'm referring to, the box that comes to your home.
Yeah, they just came into the big golf
Cologuard.
tournament. That's for the average person. Everybody that turns not 50 anymore, now the guideline from the American Cancer Society is stepping up, and it's now 45.
So it's getting younger.
It's, thank God. Well, and colon cancer, colorectal cancer is on the rise in people under the age of 45.
Do they know why at all?
They're all, all the researchers out there and doctors, they're all working on that. I mean, there's elements of proper diet, possibly STDs could be part of that.
Right.
Our guys right here are cancer researchers here have been studying that for years.
Right.
But it's alarmingly on the rise. So having them lower the age of getting in for your colonoscopy to 45 was a big deal. And we just need to be educated, and it's part of, originally all I wanted Butt Check to be was to get people in for their colonoscopy. That's all I cared about. And then I started developing relationships with national cancer organizations, Stand Up to Cancer, all of the major colorectal cancer alliances that are out there. I've worked with over a 12-year period of now to be an advocate to get people screened. That's the first and foremost. And then to also pay attention to the facts, symptoms, know the kind of cancer, know your family history, and then support cancer research. I mean, it's science. Let's support our cancer research. So Butt Check, now that we will be that nonprofit, is specifically for promoting all of the things I talked about, but also cancer research in our own backyard that's going on. That's what we're looking to do.
John, corporate-wise, with how do I put this? Do they really care today about the health of anybody they're hiring, do you think? Is this changing, maybe?
It is. There's no question about it. I mean, the compensation model for corporations are changing with the generations by far. And there's no question that it's becoming more and more prolific to have a healthy workforce, more so than ever. And even though 20 years ago we had this concept and we talked about it a lot, and it was, and I worked for companies and I promoted health and wellness inside companies, and it got refuted because of whatever, and that's changing.
You're probably ahead of the game, mate, at that time. And there are companies here in Tucson that I can't even get an appointment with just to talk about the subject matter because they're just too busy servicing their clients in preventive health networks and wellness concepts and things along those lines. So, it's interesting to hear Kim talk about butt check and what she's doing, because, there's an opportunity there for that whole conversation to go into the major corporations and the major employers. I was going to say, I could see a link there, actually.
Yeah.
And they will get behind a cause.
They will.
Usually.
They will.
Corporations and particularly not-for-profit. So that would be a very, very good thing. We're nearly out of time, but I want to ask you this. You've done an enormous amount of living, Kim. And for that matter, John, you have too, you've been around the block.
I'm still alive.
Let me ask you this. Let's start with you, John, if you don't mind. We'll go clockwise. If you had it all over again, okay, and you knew what you knew now, hindsight's wonderful, but what are the major changes you would do? Looking back, if you had it all over, what wouldn't you do, as the advice for somebody listening out there?
Wow, that's a very surreal question. What I wouldn't do is be somewhat of the isolationist that I was in my younger years. I didn't grow up in a community that was. We're all independent-minded folks.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We just took care of our own business and
kept to yourself pretty much.
I guess so. I wouldn't say no neighbor is a good neighbor, but it was, it was just one of those things where I found later in life that really reaching out and the essence of Waechter Advisory Network might be, in a certain sense, it's been around a while, but it was playing kind of catch up,
Mm-hmm.
and networking is just a huge buzzword that I'm not so sure I like right now, but the reality of it is it's relationship building and making sure that you understand the importance of relationships. And I'm not so sure I did that in my early years.
So your advice would be then?
My advice would be to create relationships early in life and keep them.
And Kim, your point of view?
I agree with that. And that's Women on the Sun. We're very intimate, very small. We're not like a great big, huge networking group, because I know the importance of relationship building. I've been told I do that really well. I've been told also I need to be honed in and have people help me, which I struggle with still today. But as far as changing anything, I've thought about that on and off forever. I wouldn't change anything, because I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have ended up in incredible, beautiful Colorado, taking the chance to just take off and do wild, crazy things.
Yeah, right. As life came along.
I was scared.
So your message would be what?
I wouldn't change anything. I look at other people that are more organized than I am, or they're more this or that, more education. I wouldn't change. I can't change anything that I did because I'm so happy to be where I am here today.
So to extrapolate that for you to give advice on that is be yourself.
Be yourself.
Go with the flow. Follow
your passion, and do what makes you happy with your work. That's what I would say. Make sure you're very, very happy with what you do.
Both John Waechter and Kim Adair, their photographs and their bios and so on are going to be on the site permanently. Just go to www.tucsonbusinessradiox.com And you can read all about them and, get in touch. They'll have their phone numbers and so on and their contact points should you like to speak with them. Thank you for being with us today. John Waechter, I thank you. And Kim Adair.
Thank you for having me.
And good luck with everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
We'll be back with another Tucson Means Business with the compliments of the 49ers Golf and Country Club in the not-too-distant future.